Hello everyone and welcome back to Abundantly Minimal. I must admit, a year ago I wouldn't have foreseen myself making this video, but here we are. As you saw from the title, my husband and I have unsuccessfully tried to get pregnant for a year now. I'm not necessarily excited about making this video, but yet I have felt very compelled to share my experience and share so much that I've learned over the past year. I do have PCOS, so that is the leading cause of infertility in the US, and I'm sure that definitely played a huge role in this. However, a lot of what I have learned I think can also benefit anyone who wants to try to get pregnant or get pregnant more quickly, just because there was so much wasted time and poor choices both on my behalf as well as the medical system. And so I really want to share that because I don't want people to go through the same thing that I did this past year. Of course, we've got a couple disclaimers to start. First of all, I am not a doctor or trained medical professional. I'm only speaking on behalf of my own experience. If something resonates with you today, I encourage you to do your own research and look things up to be informed about your own personal circumstances. Number two, it's going to be very TMI. I am not holding back anything. I really want to make sure that this video can help people who want to get pregnant, as well as, I guess, give some context too over the past year and whatnot, where we find ourselves at this time. Third, my experience is from being in the US, so I'm sure that different healthcare options will vary quite a bit based on where someone's from. Could be worse, could be better. And with that in mind, even within the US, there can be such a variation based on the types of care available. So I know these outcomes can vary a lot. And lastly, although I'm certainly disappointed that this has been our reality, I am not looking for pity with this video. And actually, as I'll discuss at the end, I'm actually doing much, much better now than I was earlier in our journey. And I'm feeling actually quite hopeful and optimistic. So all is well. In this video today, I'll be walking through our timeline of the last year, as well as my main 12 lessons learned through the process that can hopefully help reduce the time it takes for someone to get pregnant and help also if you've got PCOS too. And then at the end, I'll be sharing my mental health journey through this process and different mindset shifts that have helped me a lot, especially helped me feel better even though we're at this point. So that's kind of a rundown of what we can expect. And I do have 4 pages of notes here, so it's going to be a longer one, but I didn't want to forget anything. Let's first start out. The very first phase of our process was the first 3 cycles. For me, this was June of last year to November because, fun times, I actually had 49-day cycles at this point. So already not good. I should have maybe realized that that was not good, but I kind of liked having longer cycles because, hey, less periods, living life, not dealing with as much of that. But yeah, that would come back to bite me in this. So we're already starting off, with a big lesson learned. I wasn't too nervous or stressed out about things related to getting pregnant these first 3 cycles, just because it does take a lot of people, like not their first try, sometimes second try, third try, etc., to get pregnant. So it's like, hey, it just might not work out right away. I also had just been diagnosed with PCOS just a couple months prior, and in May of last year got clearance that a large concerning cyst was gone. Admittedly, there was a lot of stress, positive stress in our lives, but we had just moved and there was a lot to do with setting up the home. And so I know that also kept our minds off of the process or, feeling like it, might not happen right away just because there was a lot of stress involved in that moving process. Both Jake and I were taking a variety of supplements that we had seen recommended in multiple places to promote egg and sperm quality, and those just kind of continued. That was an easy enough thing that we could do. And since it can take like 3 months, for instance, or like 100 days for an egg during its maturation process before it's released, we wanted to make sure we had started early enough with those supplements to ensure, better quality or to hopefully speed things up. Of course, I mentioned 49-day cycles. It's tough because online, since I hadn't really looked into it too much, it was tough for me to know when I was ovulating. Quotes because I actually wasn't, but we'll get into that later. So basically, I really didn't know when exactly I could count on that because, the averages you see online those are not for people with 49-day cycles. And I also never had any symptoms of ovulation or, different phases. I never had PMS. So there were not really clear signs to me of what my body was doing. I never knew when my next period was coming. And so I would take pregnancy tests, here and there, but I was never crushed by a negative, even though they all were, because I didn't know, maybe I just tested too early. I just didn't know. So this was really just an ignorant time period, and I was just going for it, but really didn't know that much. So that was phase 1, but we learned some lessons right away. Lesson number 1, make sure you know very well what a cycle is supposed to look like. The most helpful book I read was called Period Repair Manual. I read many books, but this one was so clear to me and talking about what you should expect from your cycle. And knowing that, that I feel like should be required reading for everyone, because that opened my eyes so much to what was supposed to be happening. Now, I did not actually read this book during these first 3 cycles. I wish I had, but basically, make sure you understand what's supposed to happen. And probably if you have any issues or challenges related to your cycle, you can use that to help you get a diagnosis for what might be going on, or get medical help to know, hey, my cycles are really long or irregular, and this happens. That could help you get outcomes earlier that could then help you change your actions to get pregnant. Lesson number 2 is don't get ahead of yourself with the learning that you're doing. I am very much a go-getter, overachiever. I love to learn. And so, of course, when we started trying to get pregnant, I got all these different pregnancy books and was learning about what pregnancy is like. But newsflash, I'm still not pregnant. I should have at that time been reading books about period regulation, getting pregnant. I was jumping the gun a little bit on that, and really, let's not, get ahead of ourselves. There's plenty of time to learn all the things, but make sure if you're not pregnant yet, learn about the process if you're looking to speed things up. Lesson number 3, this maybe was just me, but I often thought of fertility as monthly chances, monthly cycles. But that works for a lot of people, but not if you have a 49-day cycle. The first 5 months of trying to conceive, I only had 3 cycles. And so already someone might have 5 cycles and I only had 3. So I think I had that mindset shift of every month I get a chance. But actually you only get as many chances as cycles you have. So that was definitely kind of a wake-up call to me of, oh, this long cycle I have is not very helpful for these purposes. And, I'm already approaching almost 6 months of this, and we've only had 3 chances. So it definitely, it was a wake-up call. All right, now we're going to approach each cycle individually because we started doing more interventions or research during each cycle. So cycle 4 now. The cycle, I will say, am I ovulating? In November, I did go get a physical with a new doctor. Unfortunately, my other doctor had left the practice, so I had to find a new one, and I loved her. She was awesome. She did notice that I needed a booster shot for my MMR and varicella vaccine, so she encouraged me to do that. We talked about how I was trying to get pregnant, and she said, well, it might be best to get them now before you're pregnant since you can't get them while you're pregnant. So I thought, it makes sense. So I did get those vaccines. I must admit, I did not realize that then I would have to sit that cycle out. I guess I didn't realize that. That was on the paper they give you after you get the vaccine. And so I was pretty disappointed about that just because it felt like, these first 3 cycles, nothing happened. And now my 4th cycle, it feels like a wasted chance. But I didn't want it to be wasted, even though I knew we couldn't actually try that cycle. So I decided, I'm going to test my LH levels every day, luteinizing hormone. The brain releases luteinizing hormone. This is my best, my best understanding of it. But when you see an LH spike or surge, that happens usually maybe 24 to 36 hours before you ovulate. So the idea is if you have those test strips or you're testing for it, urine test, then you can maybe predict when ovulation's coming. So I thought, I'll just check to see if I can find when my ovulation window is, because that's very important. So I resolved to take those every single day until I found the ovulation window. And I never did. I never saw that spike in LH levels. And so this is where I start to think, this is not good. I should have seen one. So either I didn't ovulate this cycle, or maybe I haven't been ovulating. As I mentioned in my previous PCOS videos, I had started taking the supplement inositol, and I was taking a bit of it, not the full therapeutic dose, which I didn't even know about therapeutic doses at that point. Like to take the amount to have the full benefits that they've studied in, clinical trials and whatnot. So I was taking some of it. I was having some weird side effects like body acne and rashes. So I actually ended up stopping it, but then that made my cycle worse. So I was like, I think I need to try it. I ended up switching brands to Ovasitol, which is, I think, the most popular brand, or at least people promote it a lot online. But that did actually help. I didn't have those same side effects. And I learned to make sure I was taking enough for the full therapeutic dose. Long story short, I was able with this supplement to reduce my next cycle from the 49-ish days to 41 days. So that definitely helped a lot in that sense. That felt like I was moving in the right direction. But again, I think from the LH strips, I was not ovulating. So more lessons learned. Lesson number 4, make sure you are all up to date on your vaccine boosters or anything else that you can't do while pregnant ahead of time, just so it doesn't slow you down later. Because I was really upset about that wasted cycle. Lesson 5, look up the therapeutic dose of different medications to make sure that you can get the full benefits, especially if it's more of like an over-the-counter supplement, because had I done that sooner, I might have had more success earlier on, or at the very least, shorter cycles. And related to that, lesson 6, don't be afraid to switch brands of different supplements in case one doesn't work. I think I kind of thought that they would all be the same, but I have found that to be the case both with that as well as melatonin. I'm not going to really get into it too much in this video. I've had many sleep issues over the years and have very high energy. So getting regular sleep has been quite difficult. I did try melatonin from one brand a couple years ago, purely intending it for the sleep aspect, and it made me quite depressed. So I stopped taking that. I saw in more recent times that melatonin has been associated with improved egg quality. If you do 3 milligrams a day was what was studied. So I thought, I should try it as part of my, egg quality supplements. And if it helps me sleep, that's cool. Different brand, and it worked amazing. No issues with mental health at all. So really have found benefits with sometimes just switching up the brand of supplements. Of course, it's annoying because you have to pay for, a supplement that might not work and then try it again. But, when you're a little more desperate, you got to do what you got to do. All right, cycle number 5 now. We are able to try again to get pregnant. And it's really the looking for answers cycle. Now that I had the suspicion that I wasn't actually ovulating, I knew I needed to get more serious with really confirming that. And with that, it was also the time of Black Friday, so I decided to make 2 purchases to help me, and I honestly wish I had purchased these sooner. Number 1, I purchased the Oura Ring, and I have been a huge fan of this. One of the reasons why I purchased it was because it monitors your temperature, and in your cycle, the temperature regulation can be a helpful sign to confirm ovulation, because after you've ovulated, your progesterone level is elevated, which means that you're going to see a slightly higher temperature. And you certainly don't need a tool like this to track that. You can track that, with like a basal thermometer. There's different programs and apps that help with that. But I found, especially as someone with sleep issues, you're supposed to take it like first thing, and you can't get out of bed and you can't drink water. Like there's a lot of restrictions. It has to be the same time every day. For someone with sleep issues, that was just so stressful. Whereas this will monitor my temperature throughout the night, throughout whenever. And it gives me a read on the phone. I can see the difference between, the higher levels and the lower levels. So for me, this was peace of mind, and that's why I decided to purchase it. And then also I got the Infertility fertility monitor, and this is a little monitor you hook up to your phone, and it's still like a urine test first thing in the morning. It measures 4 different hormone levels in the urine. So it's measuring estrogen, FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, LH, which I mentioned already, and progesterone. So it measures these, and because of it, it can not only detect the LH surge, which shows you, hey, you might be ovulating soon, then it detects progesterone levels to determine, hey, did you actually ovulate? And then it can confirm ovulation. So those tools both were immensely helpful in this cycle, and I learned that I was indeed not ovulating. So the Oura Ring actually did not show any temperature variation this month, so I was able to tell I wasn't ovulating. But what was quite eye-opening is that my stress levels were off the charts. Now, I was already suspicious that my PCOS type was more so like the cortisol adrenal PCOS, but yeah, it would say like, wow, you had a really high stress day today. I hope you can take some time to unwind. And the high stress day was just me living my life here at home. I work from home. I don't work nearly as much as I used to. I would describe it as a fairly mellow life. So the fact I was having such an elevated stress response was concerning to me, especially because I didn't really understand why. So then I had to focus more on stress reduction. The Inedo monitor showed that I had high estrogen and really nothing in terms of the other levels. Hardly any FSH, progesterone, or really no LH surge. So that was very clear to me that I was not ovulating. Fortunately, I do believe taking the Ovasitol did help me reduce my cycle length a little more. I did get it down to 37 days this month. So it did feel like we were moving in the right direction. And during this time, I was doing a lot more research. I specifically found hearing different people's stories and anecdotal, experiences helped a lot, especially in some of the online Reddit pages for people with PCOS who are trying to conceive. And I do credit that research and reading people's experiences with being very helpful in helping me know what my next steps were probably going to be and helping prepare myself based on what I was experiencing and just, understanding what was going on. So lesson number 7, I wish I would have invested more in myself and this fertility journey sooner. It sucks to have to spend more money on different tools when, for many people, they can just get pregnant for free very easily. But had I started with these tools, I would have gotten answers months sooner. And so it sucks to have to spend the money, but it can make a huge difference. And some of the tools, like the Oura Ring, it's not just for fertility. So there have been other benefits for me, such as with tracking sleep and stress, beyond the fertility aspect. And lesson number 8, learn as much as you can to be your best advocate. In this journey, I have found that I really have had to do a lot of my own research because sometimes you can't count on the way the medical system is set up, or, you can't necessarily count on, other people as much when everyone's experience is so nuanced. And I'll get into this later, especially this next cycle, but I've had some disappointing experiences with medical staff, and I am really grateful that I had done as much research as I had to know, like, hey, these are red flags. I need to take a more active and informed approach to solve this problem. So definitely, I think you can't necessarily draw major conclusions from anecdotal evidence, but you can definitely start to piece together what might be happening a little better the more you inform yourself. Now we get into cycle number 6, which is the low point. This is in February through early March. My OBGYN had told me to make an appointment after we had tried for 6 months and if we hadn't gotten pregnant yet. So technically it was 8 months, but had only been 5 cycles. So I know we were a little delayed, but now I knew I wasn't ovulating, so I had more tools and evidence to bring in. I even showed her the chart on my Inedo page to show her, confirmed, I'm not ovulating. And I did have a really positive experience with her before. She without me bringing it up, she had diagnosed PCOS and had done all the tests. So I felt really supported previously, and I was, feeling hopeful going back there. So one of the first things I had done a lot of research about was taking metformin. And it is a commonly prescribed medication, technically a diabetes drug, but it's commonly prescribed for PCOS patients. And it has a lot of benefits that have been studied quite a bit. And, from my understanding, it's kind of like a first line of defense. It's not the most effective fertility path, but it can help with fertility, and it can help with restoring ovulation, and it can also help with some other things like improved egg quality, reducing miscarriage rates, etc. So I asked about that, and she was like, don't really care how you are or are not managing blood sugar. We're not going to do that right now. So that was a bit frustrating, especially because, I had really taken some time to study it and see if that could help. I did learn that when they tell you to come back in 6 months or 12 months, whatever, it doesn't mean they're actually going to do anything. It's more so like, oh, now that you have failed to get pregnant, now we'll test you for things. We're going to test for a variety of, different factors to see if there's anything obvious of why you're not getting pregnant. So that's pretty standard. They wanted to do analysis of Jake. They wanted to check to make sure my fallopian tubes were open with an ultrasound or HSG. And she also said we could do genetic testing. So they had a test that would test like for 14 common genetic issues. And she said, if insurance didn't cover it, it would be like $250. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. I went ahead with it. They also talked about how they induce ovulation with medication followed by a blood test, doing unmonitored cycles. A lot of that is very standard stuff. So I wasn't thrilled during that appointment, but I also wasn't upset yet. So it's more so what follows then where things got worse. So, okay, they gave me a plan. My gut was telling me it was not a good choice to move forward with them because they weren't able to do monitored cycles. Difference between monitored and unmonitored cycles of ovulation induction. They'll give you the medication in both, which is either letrozole or Clomid. Those can help trick the brain into sending out the correct amount of the different hormones to help, the follicles grow to hopefully get to the point where you can ovulate. I simplified that a lot, but that's the gist. In an unmonitored cycle, they give you the medication and you hope for the best. They can do a blood test later to see if you ovulated. The risk of that is you don't really know what's happening or how your body's responding. So you might not be having a response at all, in which case it's another wasted cycle. And they can't if they're not monitoring, they can't up the dose of the medication to trigger a response. And then the more serious issue is that, especially as someone who had a 7-centimeter cyst, recently, the other issue is that you could have a very strong response, or it could, potentially lead to more cysts forming or issues that the ovary becomes inflamed, could twist on itself. You could even lose an ovary in the worst case scenario. So definitely didn't want that, and I had a lot of concerns. But I did want to put that aside and just try to stay focused on the plan that she provided. So first, we were trying to get Jake's analysis done. So she gave a referral sheet. We contact the clinic we're supposed to go through, and they are very uncooperative and can't really accept the referral that was given. So we're playing phone tag between my doctor's office and this fertility clinic. Then Jake, after we weren't getting anywhere, then Jake went through his primary care provider to try to get the referral to be able to do the test. Contacted the fertility center. It was a nightmare. Basically about 2 weeks with frequent phone calls, and nothing was coming from it, even going through 2 doctors. So this is already frustrating. What's also frustrating, fortunately, the genetic testing results came back fine. I didn't have any of the common genetic issues, but I did get a $900 bill for that. And I learned later the company that my doctor's office uses for the genetic testing, Natera, they've had a lot of issues and scam stuff. So fortunately, through a really long and argumentative phone call, I was able to get the price reduced to the $250 that was claimed by my doctor, as opposed to the $900. But I definitely was feeling frustrated by that, certainly. And then the final issue, I was supposed to get the ultrasound, the HSG, which I don't remember what it stands for, but to see if the fallopian tubes were open before we proceeded. And I also was supposed to get it sometime between day 5 and day 10 of my cycle. So with someone who really doesn't know when my cycles are coming, it's not something you can plan ahead. So I get my period, I call that same day, and they have no ability in their office for the next 3 months. And so that was the moment where I was like, oh, shoot, this isn't working. Jake can't get his testing done. I can't get the appointment for 3 months. And I don't even know if I could take this appointment because I don't know if it would be day 5 through day 10. And so I just remember breaking down because I knew at this point that there was nothing we could do with any of the regular medical professionals in our network, which is a pretty big network. So I was really disappointed and surprised that this happened. So it was a rough day, and I was crying a lot that day, but we immediately started looking at fertility centers. Definitely avoiding the one that was dysfunctional with trying to get Jake's analysis earlier. And so we narrowed down 4 in our area to start that gave us like a good vibe overall, and then poured over their websites, their reviews, all of that. And we did both actually come to the same agreement on our own separate research that there was one that really stood out to us. And I think what I really liked about them is that they were very transparent. They had pricing actually listed completely out if you don't have insurance, which is nice because in the US, insurance can be so confusing. It made me happy to know what the max price was if there wasn't insurance. We do have insurance, and it's been a lot less than what's been listed, but it just gave me peace of mind. And also they had listed out what I needed, which were monitored letrozole cycles is what I was looking for. And I didn't want to be pressured into IVF yet, just because, it's been some time, but I think I'm still ultimately pretty early in the journey. And there were a lot of good reviews. So we felt confident going through that, and we were able to set up an appointment, within about a month from that point. It would have been sooner, but we did also, kind of in the midst of this frustration, we actually booked a trip to Hawaii. I was able to get free airline tickets, and so I thought, you know what, we need to get away. So I had kind of put off travel for a while, even though it's my favorite thing to do, because I was like, well, if I'm pregnant, it's not going to be as much fun, etc. But I was like, we gotta go. So we did that trip, and then we had that appointment scheduled. So many lessons from this cycle. Lesson 9, when a doctor says, come back in a year if you're still not pregnant, or come back in 6 months, I learned that really doesn't necessarily mean anything actionable. That's just when a lot of doctors are going to start running some tests, at least in the US. And although none of the tests that they ran actually had any concerns, really our only concerns have been related to me not ovulating, making trying to get pregnant impossible. I know that I would be quite frustrated if, we waited so long for these tests to happen, and to find something then, at the year mark, that would just be really frustrating, especially since estimates show that for like 40% of fertility issues, it's because of men's role and their test, though my doctor's office couldn't seem to perform it. Fertility centers, many of them can perform them very quickly and relatively easily and efficiently, and then if there's like an issue. So I think the advice when they're telling you, hey, come back in a year, I would question your doctors about that if you are someone who wants to take a more active role in your fertility journey. I know in our case, the wasted time has been very frustrating. I wasn't really seeking solutions as much early on and getting to the bottom of what was going on, but it would be very upset. I think now that we've made it to the point of a full year of trying, I think it's something that I certainly wish I didn't really have faith in the come back in 6 months, come back in a year sort of situation. Just because, yeah, you maybe wasted an important year of your life. And if you are someone like me, who, more so tried to get their ducks in a row and, live a full life, and you're starting a family a little bit later, like I'm 33, then, I really don't think that's good advice. Especially, long story short, the new fertility clinic was so much better. Everything was easy to schedule. And, Jake got right in for his analysis. I was able to set up the appointment for that saline ultrasound I needed pretty much immediately. And we were able to get those answers right away. And they weren't even as expensive as we feared. After the insurance payment, Jake's analysis was only $10. So we were waiting and playing those referral phone call games for a while. And yet at the end of the day, we paid $10. Why did we put ourselves through that when we could have just gone to the fertility clinic sooner? So I really think don't necessarily listen to those 6-month or 1-year guidelines. And also from an insurance perspective, there was never any formal declaration of, yes, we've been trying for this many months. It has been a year now, but I don't know if anyone actually measures that or records that. So I think you might be able to go through those services sooner. And I know that part of the reason they put those policies in effect is because most people will get pregnant in a year of trying. I think the numbers are 5 out of 6. So that's awesome if, you don't have to worry about this stuff. But if you are that 1 out of 6, it sucks. So I think that's been a huge lesson, just kind of rethinking what those standard practices are. Lesson 10, though it can be scary to move forward with a fertility clinic, once we made that change, everything was better after. We've been able to actually move forward, take action, and we actually have a chance to get pregnant now. And so I really wish we would have gone through them sooner. And it makes sense. I had a not great experience with my OBGYN, but half the patients she's seen that I've seen in the waiting rooms are cute pregnant couples. So of course, I'm not like a priority, I'm just one person and she's seen a variety of stuff. So going to an actual fertility clinic, they can actually help you better. So I think for me, I was so nervous and it felt like such a huge step to move forward with a fertility clinic, but I did have truly such a positive experience the whole way through. And lesson 11, getting pregnant might take longer than you expect, so don't put your hobbies and major interests on hold during the process. Like I said, travel is one of my passions. I love travel, and especially with travel hacking, we get a lot of travel for free these days. And so we had not done a big trip since we came back from a big road trip in March of 2024. So it had been a while. And so in February, we were like, hey, you know what? Let's do this. Let's go to Hawaii because we had never been. And it was a beautiful time and great to focus on fun and have something to look forward to again. So that's just one example for me. Whatever your interests are, I think I was like, well, let's not book something because what if I'm pregnant? What if I'm feeling sick? But life is short. You don't know what the path holds. And even if you are pregnant traveling, you can probably still have a pretty good time or whatever the interest is. The next phase, we have our fertility center appointment and cycle 7. And this is a major turning point. The appointment goes well, we get done all of our different testing, and there are no other issues. It was also helpful because when we met with the reproductive endocrinologist, she definitely validated what my concerns were about the unmonitored letrozole cycles and the risks in that, especially given my history and from the ultrasound they saw. That was very helpful, and she also, even without me bringing it up, she said we should get you on metformin because of your PCOS, and that also has helped a lot, I think, so far. It's also been cool. I haven't really had any side effects because for some people there are a lot of side effects, but you never know. I'm on the extended release version. So with that in mind, got that prescribed. She also prescribed Provera for me, which Provera can be used to induce a period if your cycle is getting very long. I didn't want to start out using that because I wanted to be able to kind of go with the natural flow of my cycle. However, this cycle was my longest ever. I do attest that it's because I was on the metformin, but from what I was researching, I think my body was more so trying to ovulate that cycle because there were several phases during the cycle I got super sick. Intense nausea, vomiting, really feeling bleh. And out of curiosity, I used my test strips, my Anito fertility monitor, and what do you know? My LH was surging. I saw higher levels than I had ever seen before. And I'm thinking, whoa, am I about to ovulate? I don't think I did because the fertility monitor actually never showed like a progesterone rise, but I think my body was really trying to ovulate. So that led to a longer cycle since the body, I think, tried 3 separate times because I had multiple surges of LH to ovulate. At the end, the cycle ended up being 78 days, which is pretty bad, but I did end up using the Provera at the end to induce a period, and there were no side effects during the process, but at the end I did see, it was quite a cycle. It was like a waterfall. But I think it also was good to sort of just kind of cleanse things out a little bit as we prepare to the current cycle that I'm on. And just lesson 12 I learned from this cycle is to stay open-minded about different treatments and medications. I think sometimes I myself can be nervous about trying a new medication because of different side effects. Maybe I'm one of the lucky ones, but I actually have had no side effects of the metformin. I didn't have any side effects of the Provera, and I've started my monitored cycles. This has been my first one, and I didn't actually have any side effects from the letrozole either. So maybe I'm one of the lucky ones, or maybe, they might not bring as many side effects as some report. I had talked so much I had to import the footage and clear my memory card. Anywho, that brings us to today and this current cycle. And like I said, once we shifted to the fertility clinic, everything was better and easier. And so in our case, once my 78-day cycle finally ended, I went in on day 3 for blood work and an ultrasound, and then they started me on letrozole at 5 milligrams for 5 days, starting with day 5. So I took that day 5 through 9, and then it is currently day 10 the day I'm filming this, and I went in for an ultrasound this morning. And I was so excited and relieved that I was responding to the medication, and I had 3 follicles that were growing and were larger than the rest. I'll be going in 2 days from now for another ultrasound to see if the one follicle becomes dominant and see what happens. I also have, it arrived today, Avidril, which is an injectable medication that can really help trigger ovulation. So I'm so excited things are finally moving in the right direction, and I'm hopeful that this can work out. We're ending this year in a much more hopeful and optimistic place than when we started. Now that I've kind of shared the whole timeline, I do want to talk about the mental health aspect of this journey, just because I wasn't prepared for this, and I've had a very positive, optimistic attitude throughout my life, and so I think I did believe that it wouldn't, take us this long to get pregnant, and especially realizing that after all the factors have been accounted for, that I am the problem, and that since I haven't been ovulating, I don't know for how long, it was going to be impossible until I sought treatment. So I think that has been a lot to process. So I think my first tip from a mental health perspective is to really allow yourself to feel whatever emotions come to the surface and take the time to, feel them, work through them, and understand what's going on, within you as to why these feelings come up, because there was such a huge range of emotions: frustration, sadness, emptiness, longing, jealousy or envy when I would see other people getting pregnant or posting their pregnancy announcements, or going to a baby shower. Feelings like my body wasn't working right, or distrust of my body, and shame. So there was a lot of different emotions at play here. And, I think on one hand, these feelings are valid. Whatever you end up feeling, even though, I'm not proud of that I felt so many strong feelings when I found out someone else was getting pregnant. I admit I cried for most of the pregnancies I found out about at first. Not like to people's faces. I can put on a good, like, congratulations. But there was a deep pain within, not because of them, but because of that longing that, I couldn't wait to be able to see those 2 lines on a pregnancy test, or to be able to go into an ultrasound and hear a heartbeat. Those have felt so out of reach. And so I had to work through that, because I didn't want to be the person who would cry when I found out someone else got pregnant. Like, I wasn't proud of that. But I do want to share that just because, I think hopefully if someone else is watching this who's been navigating infertility, it maybe can help you feel less alone. No one wants to be in this position, but we can support one another in this situation. And of course, I should clarify, I never felt any of these feelings when I knew someone got pregnant who also had experienced, fertility challenges and whatnot. But working through these feelings is important, I think. And fortunately, I think I've finally gotten to a place where I'm okay. The last 5 or 6 pregnancies I found out about, I didn't cry at all. And I actually only felt joy for those people. And I think it's a result of how much time has been spent working through the feelings and understanding why I was having these different visceral reactions. So it's, I think, important to navigate that as best you can and, figure out the root cause of these feelings. I think it's also really important for my own mental health, and maybe this applies to others, is to not make comparisons. Now, we can say this about anything. It's good to not compare yourself, but especially on this journey of trying to get pregnant and seeing other people getting pregnant, you have to have those blinders on and stay focused. It's my own path, my body's not working the same way as other people's, and our circumstances are different too. I still, I love my life, and I need to just be patient. So that was helpful. I think also too, comparing oneself is just kind of a recipe for bitterness. I know, especially in the finances of it, we have spent several $1,000s thus far on this fertility journey. And for some people who get pregnant the first try, they probably didn't spend any dollars on it. And so that's not helpful to think about that. So I try to just tune that out and not go there. I think it's also been important to really lean into gratitude. And I was, reflecting, like, why have I always been a grateful person who's loved the little things in life and been just a very happy, hopeful person? But then all of a sudden, now that I can't get pregnant, where did that gratitude go? Like, why am I no longer appreciating all the great things we had before just now that I can't get pregnant? So I had to work on that a lot too, to make sure that even though something in life is not working out as we wish, there's still so many things to be grateful for. We get to go out in nature on walks and enjoy, the beautiful, warm weather, being able to have such an amazing partner, and love the life and job that we get to do, having a wonderful family who's close by that we can see frequently, being able, there's so much to be grateful for, and especially as this is a very challenging time globally, economically, people are suffering. And even though we have had a hard time getting pregnant, we still have so much to be grateful for. So I really had to remember that and shift that focus to be something that I'm thinking of regularly. And this took me a long time to get to this place, but I've actually really been trying to lean into gratitude for why this happened and to be appreciative that I didn't get pregnant right away. And, to feel like this year-long process meant something and happened for a reason. So this was definitely very tricky, but I think this has been helpful in me navigating my feelings going forward and finding more hope and positivity in. Some of the things that I'm grateful for that it took longer. Number one, realizing that I had a stress problem and that I needed to work through this different things. I've tried a variety of different methods to help reduce the stress, and it has helped. I did start acupuncture, which I did for a while, and I actually downsized our company, so it's just Jake and I, and that's helped stress. So there's been a variety of things that have reduced stress, and I'm really glad that I did those, because that stress would not have been helpful and maybe could have gotten worse once a kid was added to the mix. So I'm glad I was able to work on that. Likewise, I have been learning to prioritize sleep. This has been a more recent change, but I realized over the last basically since my sophomore year of college, I have been getting at most probably an average of 6 hours of sleep a night. Like I said, I'm very high energy. I never burned out, even in my peak workaholic stage, but I know that my body needs sleep, and I'm understanding more of the importance, these last few months. So it's really tough. I have to do a lot just to be able to get more sleep and fall asleep, but I am trying to prioritize that. And as long as I do about 5 to 10 things a day differently than I did before, I can actually get 7 hours of sleep. So we're working it. We're making progress. This has also really taught me a lot of patience. I've always been a go-getter, like I said, and truly I've always believed if I had a dream, I could make it happen. I'm not afraid of working hard, and this has been something to be like, hey, you know what? The goals that you have are not necessarily going to happen, and it's not going to happen at the timeline you initially thought. That's okay. Have to be patient with it. And also for a planner like myself, it's been important to take things more like at a day at a time, and a week at a time, a cycle at a time. And that's been a very valuable lesson too. During the last year of trying to get pregnant, we have also, I'm really grateful that we've been able to shift our work to be more, passive rather than active. We do run an online curriculum business, and so a lot of our work has been focused on creating new products for our store. We currently have almost 800 products for sale, so it's a pretty big catalog, but this year has helped me pull back from work, and I think now I can see what life would look like in more of a maternity leave role, and really reducing the work to what's most essential. So that has been positive, and through this extra time, I've been able to be strategic and make choices that I think will help me in the long run as a mom. I'm also grateful that all of this information has come up before this first pregnancy, because even though, this is the goal, the first pregnancy is the goal, I do hope for multiple children, and so I don't want to have all this wasted time in the future before, future children. So I'm really grateful to have learned this now, so that hopefully I can then, apply what I've learned, and we can jump into whatever the helpful intervention is right away when we're ready for a second child. So I am grateful for that, because I do know many infertility cases are secondary infertility. Someone has a child and then they're not able to get pregnant with a second. I'm also grateful because we spent a year in our home, because we did essentially start trying right when we moved into this forever home. And there was certainly a lot of effort and stress involved in setting up a home. And I am pleased that it really is fully established, and we understand it better now and have more of a routine for the home maintenance. I have to imagine moving with a baby, or even while pregnant, or toddlers, or whatever dynamic, moving I just think can be stressful in any case. So I am grateful that at least we were able to get fully settled prior to this point. I am also really grateful we ended up being able to visit all 50 US states. We ended up going to Hawaii in February, like I shared, as well as then we went to Alaska at the end of May. So very recently we got back, and it was very cool I didn't know that we were going to get to do those, but again, that was the silver lining of not getting pregnant yet. It was easy for us to do those. I had free flights for both trips, given our travel hacking points that we had done. So it was awesome to be able to do that. And that certainly wasn't, a requirement for happiness, but we had just kind of figured that the 48 states we had been to in the United States was going to be at the extent of our US travel before, going to Alaska and Hawaii, but we decided to go for it since we were having trouble getting pregnant. And I think the last aspect I'm grateful for is that something I know to be true, and maybe you can relate as well. I think when something's harder, when something is more challenging than expected, I think when it finally happens, you can experience a much greater sense of appreciation, because you didn't take it for granted. I know in my business, the first year I went full time was so much harder and worse than expected. And I didn't almost give up on the dream of, having my own business, but I admittedly did, in the spring, especially as our savings started to run out, I did look more into jobs. I never actually submitted an application for a job, but I was like, this is not going well. My income from YouTube plummeted to about a third of what it was and never recovered. And I wasn't selling as many products as I hoped on the curriculum business. I was just working consistently, and I really thought it was going to fail. It was a really stressful time. But now when I look back on how much everything changed and how that next year we saw like a tremendous growth, and then it has just continued, and then Jake was able to join me full time and we lived this life together. It's now been 6 years. I am so grateful. I think I appreciate the business so much, and it means so much more to me, I think, because that first year was so hard. And so, granted, this is just anticipated, but I have to assume that because this past year has been painful and it's been a lot, but I have to assume that the challenge from this year and the deep longing to be a mom, to just be pregnant, to see a positive pregnancy test. I know that even if pregnancy is hard, and even though parenting can be hard, I think it will be so beautiful and so worth it. And I think I'll go in with a much more positive perspective, and I think I'll have strength to, push through those, tough times. I know, even, it was funny, when I was sick recently, while I was having those LH surges, like I'm sitting there by the toilet after throwing up, and I was like, I'm so happy right now. I feel miserable, but I have hope. There's hope that I can get pregnant from seeing this. And so I think, again, not undermining anyone's challenge they feel when they're pregnant, if they get pregnant easily, but I feel like when you want something so badly and it hasn't happened, I'm hopeful that it will give a lot of optimism and strength for, these upcoming journeys. So anyway, that wraps up this video, probably the longest video I've ever made. And there's been a lot, but it feels good to be able to share it and discuss it. I'm so hopeful. I know if someone I followed had posted this, I would totally have watched it, because I've always been fascinated by people's pregnancies and whatnot. And I'm hopeful that it can prevent wasted time. I've learned so much, and even if someone else who wants to get pregnant can take away just like one lesson from this video, you can probably save yourself at least a month or two in the journey, hopefully. And so we'll see. I'll definitely be getting back to more of our normal content going forward, but this was just heavy on my heart and something I wanted to share. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way to this point. I'm really appreciative, and I'll put some other videos here that were more of the PCOS videos from last year. And of course, let me know if you've got any questions down below. Thank you so much. Bye.